Hey folks, Bev from Half Acre Homestead here. I don't have anything today. I don't have anything today to cook. I don't have anything today to show you, or the only thing I got to say is right now my power has been out for close to 4 hours. And I'm really grateful it's April, almost May, or I could be in a real pickle right now. Now, I've talked about, why it's important to have long-term food storage, and I have a dug well. So if the power doesn't come back on in the next 36 hours, I can always drop a bucket down my well. And I have an outdoor fire pit. I even have an outdoor wood stove that if I need to cook on, and a barbecue. But here's the thing. In the 4 years, how long? 2005. In the 6 years I've lived in this area, our power has never, ever been out more than a half an hour to an hour. Now, right now, I know what the issue is. We've had a windstorm, and there's probably some hydro lines that have been knocked down by trees. And the wind is still, well, it's starting to calm down now. But it's really hard to repair these things while the wind's still kicking up. My whole point about this is it is never too soon to be prepared for some kind of, I don't want to say natural disaster because, but there are natural disasters. I mean, look at Japan, look at Iceland. We here last year in May, or was it June, had a 5.5 earthquake. And that woke me up enough to make me say, okay, what would happen if it was a 6.5? And or we couldn't get out of we're in a rural area, and they always deal, if there's any kind of natural disaster, they're going to deal with the larger concentration of people first, which would be the cities and towns. So I started thinking about emergency preparedness, and now there's a lot of extremists out there. And that's okay. I mean, whatever works for them. But for us, we're almost there. I mean, I'm putting in a much bigger garden this year. Not just for emergency preparedness. Boy, that wind's really kicking up. Not just for emergency preparedness, but when have you ever seen the prices of food go down? I mean, other than sales. Not very often. Food prices, as long as the population continues to rise, it's going to be more and more difficult to feed the world's population. That's where my husband and I, and aside from the fact that because there's so many industrial farms out there now to feed people on a mass level, the dignity of the animal is lost, and I'm not going to get into that. So what we're trying to do on our little half acre is we have some goats and some meat rabbits and some chickens, and I'm going to put in a much bigger garden this year. And I used to do all my own canning, and I'm going to do so again. I've gotten smart, and I've stored, because we have a good well, but I still stored water for the simple reason is, what if it was an earthquake and my well casing cracked? So what I did was I have the big 20-liter the water cooler bottles, only mine are glass, and I filled those up, and my son just brought one up from the basement in case the power stays out much longer. We don't have a ready source of heat in this house. We are on electric, and we are definitely planning on having a wood stove in here before fall. One way or the other, we will have a wood stove before fall, and I know how to cook on one. You have 2 cast iron frying pans and a cast iron Dutch oven and a good kettle, and I can put a meal together on top of a wood stove. No problem. Heck, I can cook over an open fire with that equipment. It's not difficult. It's not rocket science. It's a little more difficult, but it's not rocket science. I think what I'm trying to say is, so much of us has been lost in the generation, one or two generations from my grandmother's time. Okay. I am the youngest child of a mother who was the second youngest out of 13 children. So my parents were raised in the Great Depression. And but my mother died when I was young. So a lot of information, you got to remember, back in the 1960s and 70s, there was no internet. Where we lived, anybody who you knew was long distance. Your only ready source of information was the library. We had a TV that only got 2 channels and a radio that got 3. So we weren't as connected as we are today. Speaking of that, my remote falls on the floor. So a lot of things I have learned, I'm self-taught. But what I'm trying to say is we need to get back to basics. We need to get back to the old ways. Because what would happen if for some fluky reason we lost all power? Not as a town, not as a province, not as a continent. What if for some fluky reason we lost power? Just the power. Okay? Our communications go down. Our ready source of power goes down. I mean, I've talked to people who live in the city and they go, oh, we'll adapt. If anything like that major happens, we'll adapt. We always do. Okay, I'll adapt because I have a well. I have a ready source of fuel. I'm surrounded by trees. I have animals and things that I'm going to be, freezing and canning and storing, like food-wise. What happens after, 2 or 3 days in the city without power could be a really scary place. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of information we've lost due to multi-generational technology. Technology has made the old ways unnecessary. But you got to remember something, folks. The old ways, like quilting, okay, reduce, reuse, recycle. The old ways worked for a reason. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but A, food prices are going up. B, oil prices are going up. And when oil prices go up, everything goes up. I really think people should start thinking about what would they do, how would they be prepared if the power didn't come back on in an hour, or 2, or 3, or 2 or 3 days, or 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, the power was out here in Quebec, probably, I think it was like 15 years ago. For 3 or 4 days, a week, there was a huge ice storm. And it was an absolute massive, and it was just Quebec. So, I mean, think about it, folks. A lot of people were unprepared. Anyway, just something to think about. Cheers. I'm going to sit here in this window while the light is good, and I'm going to sew on my quilt. And I have a contraption out in the living room, or out in the dining room, where I have a steel colander over top of a candle with a little tin bowl on it, heating water for a cup of tea. But if I really need to, I can turn the barbecue on and put the kettle on for now. But why waste the propane? Anyway, this is Bev from Half Acre Homestead. Just a little rant on emergency preparedness. Have a great week.